So here is, as you can see, I was supposed to be up here with Liz Austin, who is a colleague of mine who runs the patient marketing team at Genentech. So this presentation is going to be about half as spectacular as it was going to be. Disclaimer is that I am here representing myself, and the views and different things I'm going to talk about are not necessarily the views of Genentech. So translation is, that's my Twitter handle, and if you're going to reference me as Ben at DNA versus Ben from Genentech, and I'll likely be employed a little bit longer. You know, my life in this space started with my own personal story. I went to Cal Berkeley, and in 1996, at the very end of 1996, I ripped apart my knee playing basketball. So not nearly as dramatic of a story as a lot of the people that are here. But I had a fairly awful surgery experience. You know, I sort of listened to sort of our hospital physician, had a reconstruction of my ACL using the patella tendon of my knee. And again, you know, 20-something years old, maybe about 20, I think. I listened to my physician. He got me into physical therapy after about 8 weeks. And for folks that maybe now have had this type of surgery, you know that they actually get you in physical therapy before you've even had the surgery. So about 6 months into it, I could not bend my knee more than 30 degrees. I had to go and have another set of surgeries. And this is where sort of my experience as an e-patient began. If folks remember what Yahoo used to look like in 1996, I used the Wayback Machine. I did what everyone's doing today, which I started with search. What Meredith has said, this is not something that we could ignore. And I ended up at a place called Bob's ACL www board. And it still exists today. It still looks exactly the same today. And so, you know, social media has actually been around for a lot longer. You know, we've talked about it as something that's, you know, in the last 2, 3, 4 years. But this is how I was getting my health information. And I didn't actually know who Bob was until I was preparing for this presentation. And he hasn't touched the website since 1996, but it still is a blossoming society, a tribe that Seth would call, and something that you know, we've learned is how people use the internet for health information. So this is where I started, and yet I now am responsible for an e-marketing team at Genentech, and we haven't really gotten past what we're doing in terms of push marketing. We're still not sort of tapping into how people really behave. So this is what I want to be. This is what everyone in my company who runs a marketing product or markets a product wants to be. They want to be America's next top marketing manager. And Seth talked about the resistance. So, you know, I usually present internally at Genentech, and I get to talk about things like social media. I'm going to turn it around today and talk to you guys a little bit about some of that resistance that Seth referred to. So this is what we hear every day, right? Everyone's doing social media. What's your social media strategy? Everyone's on Facebook. You have to have a Facebook page for your product, right? A lot of pressure for us to kind of think about. But we also sort of have to turn around and think of the strategy behind that. We have a product for hepatitis C, and I don't actually think people are going to want to say, I like hepatitis C to their network of friends. So we get these pressures to do things without a lot of thinking about why we do that. We need to innovate. You know, there's a couple colleagues of mine here who are on these innovation work streams at Genentech, and we're just told we have to innovate, but we don't really know where to start and where that ends, but it's just something that we're supposed to do. And then we get a lot of ideas from people, right? A lot of ideas from the people in this room, in fact, a lot of the different agencies, but they're not necessarily all connected, and we don't know always what to do with them, and a lot of it looks like snake oil sometimes. And then finally, of course, the FDA, right? We want to do all these things, but then we're certainly limited and bound by what everyone's very familiar with, which is the lack of some guidelines in this space. But FDA is really just kind of a scapegoat here, because we start to deal with our own internal sort of conversations and things that we have to work through. You know, I've been in the company for about 8 years, and these are the type of things that I still sort of have to answer to. Oncologists make all patient decisions, so why should we do any sort of patient marketing, right? That's maybe a myth, but it's something that we deal with all the time, that we have to answer to. Our patients are older and not on the internet. You know, if the internet and Facebook and all those things are being used by the 30 and 40 somethings or younger, well, most of our patients are 60 and 70, so should we really be doing that much? Physicians hate it when patients bring information printed out from the internet into the doctor's office. We don't want to burn our relationships with our physician customers. Or sort of finally, we can't measure ROI on this program, so why should we do it? And these are actually all really good questions, right? They're all equally true and not true at the same time. And we need the help of people to actually answer these questions from this room. So the result is we're still pushing our message. You know, I didn't mean to pick on any particular company. I just couldn't find one of my ads. But essentially, our ads look like this, right? It's an ad. It's at least half of it is spent on safety. And we're putting it on pages that look like this, WebMD, the different type of big health sites that are out there. And we spend an sort of unusual amount of time still doing these type of things. And the reason, and someone asked the question of Seth this morning, is because it keeps us out of jail, right? It's easy, and it's something that is fairly low risk, as long as we don't do something like this, I think. Okay. You know, and now that we're starting to get into social media, well, this is what we're doing. We got our first video up there. It took us, you know, and folks here may sympathize with this, it took us about 6 months to get our first video approved on YouTube. And it starts with this nice, very pretty black screen of 2 minutes of safety information. And then you finally get into the video. It's a 10-minute video, and then about 2 minutes in, a little bit more safety comes up. Then you get another 2 minutes in, a little bit more safety comes up. It's really not the most appealing experience, I think, for patients. We have great email programs. We have great messages to get out to patients, but they are really long because half of it is spent on safety information, right? So this is kind of how we market, and it's how we spend a lot of our time and dollars doing things. We haven't really gotten much farther. So how do we build these connections? We're at a conference called ePatient Connections. How do we get to the next step? We're starting to learn. We're starting to do different things. And this is what patients have told us that we need to do a little bit more. We've done a lot of sort of more research, I think, with patients over the last few years than we've done in the past. Know who we're speaking to and go deeper with the insights. So Meredith and Mark Bard before her, they've really built a lot of our industry with data that we need to sort of sell things internally, but we need to go even deeper than that. So, you know, 38% of patients in oncology may have changed their RX decision or challenged their doctor because of something they found out in social media. But I actually need to know a little bit more, like why, what discussion did they hear? What was the conversation that triggered that decision? Are they changing their painkiller or are they changing their chemotherapy agent? You know, those are the type of things that, again, we need the people in this room to help us answer. Be credible, right? So align to the needs that the patients have. They have a need for different types of resources than we often provide. Jonathan captured that beautifully in his presentation. And then engage with us, right? Instead of just pushing messages out there, talk to us, have a dialogue, have some back and forth. Again, this is something that's been difficult for us to do, but something that we're starting to play with, get a little bit more experience in doing. So a case study for us is cystic fibrosis. So some background for those that don't know this disease that well. This is one of the areas in our portfolio that made the most sense to do something in social media. Cystic fibrosis patients, because of their disease, actually can't really spend time together, right? So they can't get you or I sick, but they can get each other sick. And as a result of that, they spend a lot of time in online communities. And we learned that by doing a lot of sort of user groups and research. So what we did was we listened. You know, I think this is actually Radian 6, who's over here, and we used social monitoring tools, and we listened to the conversations and what type of information they were looking for, what they wanted to see, how they spent their time. And we actually brought some of these folks in. Ronnie Sharp is a fairly well-known patient in cystic fibrosis who runs his own blog, has his Twitter account, has started a couple different websites. And we really wanted to tap into his experience to get a better sense of what we should do. And then we started to evolve our site. So on the left here is a website called CF Living, which when we first launched this several years ago, we sort of mirrored a program that we had actually first launched in oncology. So it was a program that had basically just a registration page. We asked some profile information, and then we sent emails out for a period of just 1 year. And if you think about 1 year, most of our experience in cancer is with late-stage cancer patients, so we didn't want to have, obviously, years and years of messages. So that was a program that was designed for one disease state that we tried to bring over into cystic fibrosis. But in reality, we talked to our customers and learned a little bit more about the stages in life where a CF patient might want to get information. It's when they're very young. It's the parents of these kids. It's when they go to college, what happens when they have to self-administer their treatments. A lot of different issues that they have to deal with. And we decided to completely revamp our program. And now this program, you'll get communications and emails for a period of many years, depending on who you are when you come in and enter this program. And it's had an impact on the community, as you can see by the quote there from one of our users. We've also started to sort of say, okay, well, this is an area, again, where there's a community that exists in other parts of the internet and social media spaces, so could we leverage that? We launched a webcast page on Facebook. This was our first Facebook foray. And 423 likes may not sound like a huge number if you're a big consumer packaged good company, but for this product, it's tremendous. And what we started to see is that in this sort of environment, because people were finding the content so credible, they were taking it and putting it in their own site. So cysticfibrosis.com, CFTube, which is like a YouTube for CF patients, they started taking our content and putting it on their sites, tweeting their content. And when we looked at the reach we were getting over 500,000 impressions from content that we never even intended to have live past our website. So here's an example of how social media is starting to work for us. So we've put our toe in the water, right? And how do we get beyond this? I'm going to wrap up, because I know people are getting hungry, with a couple things and maybe a call to action, right? So again, this is kind of what we do today. We've got great research. Manhattan might say something like 80% of men prefer to use a urinal at the end of a row, at the corner. Then you've got an agency that comes in and says, this research says that all men like to use urinals at the end of a row. You should build more of those. And this is what happens when the execution isn't thought of a little bit more smartly. So innovation for the sake of innovation usually fails us, and we need things to be a little bit connected. So this is a little bit of a call to action. I know there's a lot of agency folks here, and there's a lot of e-patients here. We need you guys to talk to each other, right? Because there are some limitations for us to be able to go out and fly a patient into our company and talk to them and try to gather their insights. It's just harder for us than you can imagine. But you guys can bring a lot of benefit to us by talking to them. We shouldn't be building, we have 2 products in rheumatoid arthritis. We probably shouldn't be doing that without the insights of RA Warrior, who I know you guys are going to hear about or hear from later on in the program. So help us build those connections. Help us get deeper into those insights. Those 38% of patients that are making changes because of what they see in social media. Help us understand how to get there. Help us build and provide credibility, right? How do we provide the information that people really need so it's not just pushing that information out to them? And then finally, and this is sort of the promise of mobile and social media, how do you help us engage at the right places, at the right times, and in the right way? This is where we are today and what technology is enabling us to do. I should be able to message to someone when they're in that moment where they really need something from me or from our company. So innovation, this is, instead of it being for the sake of innovation, it's about meeting patient outcomes, right? And I think you guys, some of you might have gone to the South by South health stuff yesterday and heard about Cure Together. This is what we want, right? At the end of the day, we want to help meet patient outcomes. So I thank you for your time. That's all I have. And I think I'm going to sit here for a couple questions before lunch.